Of all the races who dwell upon Nirni's back, we Khajiit risk the most. Our history dwarves that of men. We sowed our crops here before the coming of the elves. Our souls stretch back beyond the counting of the years and the certainty of each sun's rising. That makes us both wise and dangerous. Religious beliefs on Tamriel are as diverse as the races themselves, and for every culture, there is a different interpretation on the question of creation. For the most part, human and elven beliefs stem from the same roots, the Elnafey, the original spirits who did not abandon the Mundus during its formation, divided into the old and wandering, Mer and Men, and these various branches sprouted their own unique leaves despite belonging to the same seed. Remarkably, we actually have a fairly clear understanding of how these groups came to inhabit the land of Dawn's beauty. But human and elven scholars have long toiled over one inconsistency. How do the beast folk fit into the picture? The Argonians have an undeniable link to the sapient histories of the marshes, and the Orcs, though it pains many Mer to admit it, can almost certainly trace their lineage back to the early Aldmer of Somerset. To many historians, the origins of the Bosmer is more inconclusive than the Argonians and the Orsimer. Wood Elven legends tell of a formless ooze, from which Ifra the forest god moulded them, and the notion that the Bosmer were created by Ifra rather than descending from the Aldmer is supported by the beliefs of another race of beasts. This is the race of beasts we'll be discussing in today's video, as their idea of creation differs greatly from those of the Men and Mer. And as a result, this race's origin story has shaped their perception of the many gods, as well as their culture. What we end up with is a race completely unlike its neighbours. Deities who are oft forgotten by other groups are adulated, while traditions that seem bizarre to Men and Mer are sacred. I'm of course talking about the Khajiit of elsewhere. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. How did the catfolk come into being? What gods do they worship and why? How have their beliefs shaped their history and their society? These are all questions we'll be answering today, so let's get right into it. In Khajiiti society, the clan mothers guide the cats in matters of spirit. They are essential in maintaining oral traditions, ensuring that every new generation is educated on their beliefs, rites, and customs. Without the clan mothers, the cats may one day forget the wisdom of their predecessors and lose touch with their unique culture. Almost everything we know about the Khajiiti creation story comes from the words of Clan Mother Anisi, as her teachings were documented and therefore may endure the centuries. The Monomyth is the foremost source for the many creation stories of Tamriel, and it begins by stating, all Tamrielic religions begin the same. Man or Mer, things begin with the dualism of Anu and his other. These twin forces go by many names: Anu Padamai, Anwiel Sifis, Ak-El, Satak Akel, is not. Anwiel is the everlasting ineffable light. Sifis is the corrupting, inexpressible action. In the middle is the grey maybe, Nirn in the Elnafex. So Men and Mer, despite their many variations, trace creation back to Anu and Padamai, light and dark. The Monomyth is explicit in its choice of words, and it says Man or Mer for good reason, because to the Khajiit, as told by Clan Mother Anisi, the roles of the two primordial forces seem to be reversed. Creation to the cats began with two littermates named Anur and Fadamai. In typical Elnafey-derived stories, Padamai is the Dark One, but in the Khajiiti story it is Anur who serves as the antagonist. Either way, Anur and Fadamai decided to wed and make children, so that they could share their happiness with their offspring. Unlike humans and elves, having a single kitten is not the norm for cats, and that fact is reflected in their creation myth. A litter usually consists of 4 kittens, but can vary from 1 to 12. Fadamai's first litter consisted of 5. There was Alkosh, Kanafi, Magrus, Mara, and Srendar. All of these names sound familiar to Men and Mer, but there are important differences we'll come to a little later. Anur and Fadamai were happy for a time, before Anur said, "We should have more children to share our happiness." Fadamai gladly agreed. There was Hermora, Hircine, Meruns, Mafala, Sangin, and Shaggerath. After this, Anur said, 2 litters is enough. for too many children will steal our happiness. But Kanafi came to Fadamai and said she was growing lonely high up in the sky, where none of her siblings could reach. So Fadamai tricked Anur into making her pregnant again, and Fadamai gave birth to the moons and their motions. And she gave birth to Nirni, the majestic sands and lush forests. And she gave birth to Azura, the dusk and the dawn. Anur caught Fadamai during the birthing, and was angered by her deception. He hit her, and she fled to the great darkness, where she gave birth to the last kitten of the last litter, Lorkhaj. The noisy kitten's heart was filled with this darkness, and it was known as Namira. Fadamai died from giving birth to so many children, but not before giving them parting gifts. She created the lunar lattice, and tasked the moons with protecting her other kittens from Anur's anger. To Nirni, Fadamai left the gift of motherhood. She said, "Nirni, you will give birth to many people as Fadamai gave birth today." And to her other daughter, Azura, she said, "To you, my favoured daughter, Fadamai leaves her greatest gift. To you, Fadamai leaves her secrets." And with these secrets, Azura would create the Khajiit. Fadamai continued and said, "When Nirni is filled with her children, take one of them and change them. Make the fastest, cleverest, most beautiful people, and call them Khajiit. The Khajiit must be the best climbers, for if Massa and Secunda fail, they must climb Kanafi's breath to set the moons back in their courses. The Khajiit must be the best deceivers, for they must always hide their nature from the children of Anur. The Khajiit must be the best survivors, for Nirni will be jealous, and she will make the sands harsh and the forests unforgiving, and the Khajiit will always be hungry and at war with Nirni." And with these words, Fadamai died. Nirni needed a place to give birth to her children, so she went to Lorkhaj, and Lorkhaj, corrupted by the great darkness, tricked Fadamai's other children into pledging themselves to the creation of a new home for Nirni's children. Some escaped and became the stars, but others fell for Lorkhaj's scheme. Many of the cat gods died to create a path for Nirni, but the ones who endured punished Lorkhaj. They tore out his heart and hid it deep within Nirni, and they said, "We curse you, noisy Lorkhaj, to walk Nirni for many phases." Nirni was grateful for Lorkhaj's trick, for it allowed her to give birth at last. She bore many children. Her litter was vast and diverse, but she wept because her favourite children, the forest people, did not know their shape. What follows is the part of the Khajiiti creation myth that explains the origins of both the Wood Elves and the Catfolk. If this story is true, then the Bosmer were not descendants of the Aldmer. But that's not a topic for today's discussion. Anyway, Azura came to the grieving Nirni and said, "Poor Nirni, stop your tears. Azura makes for you a gift of a new people." Nirni stopped weeping, and Azura spoke the first secret to the moons, and they parted and let Azura pass. And Azura took some forest people who were torn between man and beast, and she placed them in the best deserts and forests on Nirni. And Azura in her wisdom made them of many shapes, one for every purpose. And Azura named them Khajiit and told them her second secret, and taught them the value of secrets. And Azura bound the new Khajiit to the lunar lattice, as is proper for Nirni's secret defenders. Then Azura spoke the third secret, and the moons shone down on the marshes and their light became sugar. But Ifa heard the first secret and snuck in behind Azura, and Ifa could not appreciate secrets, and he told Nirni of Azura's trick. So Nirni made the deserts hot and the sands biting, and Nirni made the forest wet and filled with poisons. And Nirni thanked Ifa and let him change the forest people also. And Ifa did not have Azura's subtle wisdom, so Ifa made the forest people elves and never beasts, and Ifa named them Bosmer. And from that moment on, they were no longer in the same litter as the Khajiit. So this is the Khajiiti creation myth, at least according to Clan Mother Anisi. As with most oral traditions, I'm sure other clan mothers tell the same story with small deviations and embellishments, but in essence, this is what the cats believe. But that raises the question, if the Khajiit did not come to Tamriel with the old and wandering Elnathay, the elves and men, when did they come? Well, one popular theory stems from the existence of one Khajiit form, the Ohms and Ohms Rat. Born under a new Massa and either a full or waxing Secunda, the Ohms Khajiit look remarkably like the Bosmer, and are described as being man-faced. The third edition of the Pocket Guide has this to say: due to the fact that the Ohm's-Rat so closely resemble the elven folk, it's entirely possible that they could be cousins. Some believe that the Khajiit are simply descendants of the original Aldmer settlers in Tamriel, who evolved, like the Ultima, Bosma, Dunmer and Orsama, because of circumstance, into the cat-like race that walks the dunes of Elsewhere. But this hypothesis doesn't align with Khajiiti beliefs, and it also relies on the notion that the Bosma too evolved from the Aldmer of Somerset, which we know the cats don't subscribe to. There are a multitude of sources that support Clan Mother Anisi's explanation, including 2 entries in the same edition of the Pocket Guide. The first states, "The histories of Black Marsh, most say, were the original life forms on our continent, followed by the progenitors of the modern Khajiit, the modern Argonian, the modern Slode, the modern Dreg, and other beast folk." While the second states, Khajiit are commonly considered one of the beast folk, one of the few survivors of the original inhabitants of Tamriel before the coming of Mer and Man, and Elsewhere was their home. To be fair to the Pocket Guide, the Imperial historians generally do a stellar job of chronicling from an unbiased position, especially in the 3rd edition. There are of course moments where the human perspective is clear, but overall it is a useful source. Before the Ages of Man, an attempt to document the enigmatic events of the Dawn and Malefic eras by a High Elven scholar offers this insight. During the early Malefic era, the aboriginal beast peoples of Tamriel, the ancestors of the Khajiit, Argonian, Orcish and other beast folk, lived in pre-literate communities throughout Tamriel. And perhaps the clearest indication that the catfolk inhabited Tamriel before the Men and Mer settled the mainland comes from the Journal of Topple the Pilot. Topple was an Old Mary explorer, believed to be the first to chart the land of Dawn's beauty. He was sent in search of Old Meretz, the fabled elven homeland, but instead he came across Tamriel. One snippet of a journal entry stands out in regards to the origins of the Khajiit. It says, "The cat demons of 4 legs and 2 ran the river's length, always keeping the boat in their green-eyed sight, hissing and spitting, and roaring with rage." So before the elves and Nedic humans migrated to Tamriel, the cat demons were seen running along the shores of the Niben. Whether you choose to believe that the Khajiit have any relation to the Elnafey or not, it's quite clear that the catfolk differ to their neighbours in more than just physicality. Culturally and spiritually, they are unlike every other Tamrielic race. Their gods share similarities to the commonly known deities of the human and elven pantheons, but there are significant distinctions. Rather than distinguishing between the Aedra and the Daedra, the cats categorise their gods in the spirit groups. There are Sky Spirits, Worldly Spirits, Wandering Spirits, Dark Spirits and Adversarial Spirits. Amun-Dro, the silent priest of the Khajiit, offers a lot of insight into the nature of these spirits. First, the Sky Spirits. Azura is the chief among the Sky Spirits, for she is the mother of all Khajiit. In this regard, the Khajiit share some common ground with the Kaima. In many ways, she is the same as the Daedric Prince Azura. She is still the goddess of the dawn and dusk, and the realms of twilight found within them. But to the cats, she is also the god of magic, beauty and prophecy. The lunar lattice, the sacred interlacing astral structure that guards the Khajiit from the dangers of the great darkness, is her creation, and she's the architect of the many birth forms. She knows the name of every Khajiit who lived, lives, and ever will live. Kanafi is another of the Sky Spirits, and her role in Elsewhere is very similar to her role as Kine and Kinnereth to the Men and Elves. Joan and Jode are the Khajiiti analogues to Massa and Secunda. They are the stillborn twins of Fadamai, woven into the lunar lattice, and their motions give life to the many varying types of Khajiit in the form of sugar. Lorkhaj is of course Lorkhan, born in the Great Darkness. He forged a path for Nirni and her children, though it cost him the love of many of his siblings. He gave his life so the cats could live, and they honour his sacrifice by resisting the alluring call of the dark. Finally, there is Magrus, the sun god. He is not the god of magic to the cats, but his eye is the sun, and thus his role in Elsewhere is vital. It is said that in her realm of Moonshadow, Azura judged him as too full of fear to rule a sphere, and she tore out his eye. Magrus left to the heavens blinded, but Azura made of his eye a stone to reflect the Valiant's gate. This is the Ether Prism, which opens at dawn and closes at dusk. The worldly spirits are of course associated with the world, and not the sky. Chief among these is Nirni, the spirit of the mortal world. The Khajiit are her secret defenders, who climb the lunar lattice when it is required, and protect her domain from the darkness. Ifa was Nirni's mate, and the father of the forest people. He was corrupted by the great darkness, and like Anur, struck his littermate, killing her, causing Nirni's spirit to depart the world. Azura, Kanafi and Hircine punished him for this, and the cats do not speak of him anymore. The remaining worldly spirits are very similar to their Daedric counterparts. Hircine is the hunter. He was in love with Nirni, but she chose Ifa. He is eternally resentful of this rejection, yet simultaneously has a fondness for Nirni's children. He helps Khajiit who stray from the path. Hermora is the keeper of knowledge, who holds his great library beneath the sea. And lastly, Sangin is the spirit who distracts the Khajiit from the path. He tantalizes weak-willed cats into pursuing pleasures without purpose. The wandering spirits are made up of some familiar names, and some unknown to the other Tamrielic races. First there is Akka the Pathfinder. He is known as the first cat, and he explored the world in the early days. It is said he mated with the winged serpent of the east, the June queen of the west, and the mother mammoth of the north. He then went to the south and never returned. And by the sounds of these mythical beasts, Akka had ventured to the lands of the elves and men, Akavir, Yukuda, Admora, and Aldmeris. His son is named Alkan, the mysterious scaled prince. Alkosh is the Khajiiti equivalent to Akatosh, and he is the Dragon King. In many ways he is the same as Akatosh and Auriel, but in the Khajiiti pantheon, Alkosh fought with Akka and Alkan. Alkosh was granted rule over the myriad kingdoms of Akka along the many paths. In time, the children of Akka overthrew him and scattered his body on the west wind. It is said that when Kanafi learned this, she flew across the many paths and put Alkosh back together. In doing so, she saw all the things Akka had wrought, including those that should not be. Now, Alkosh and Kanafi safeguard the many paths from the wayward children of Akka. Finally, we have the littermates Boethra and Mephala. Boethra is a warrior just like the Daedra lord Boethia, and it is said that Anur exiled her for her rebellious nature. According to Amon-Dro, Boethra was the one to pry out Magris's eye in Azura's realm of Moonshadow. Interestingly then, even outside of Morrowind, the Khajiit believe that Boethia, Mephala and Azura work together. Mephala is the keeper of ancient secrets. The first of the dark spirits is of course tricky Lorkhaj, who was born in the Great Darkness, and the next is Namira, the name of the Great Darkness. The lunar lattice keeps her at bay, but even the power of the lattice cannot prevent her from claiming the souls of corrupted Khajiit. These wayward cats are called the Dromathra. The moons shine brightly at night, but where the bright pale light shines, the darkness is that much deeper. As the Khajiit live in the light, so things live in the dark. These are the Dromathra. In the Khajiit language of Ta'agra, Dromathra roughly translates to ghost cats or lost cats, and they are often referred to as Namira's children. Uncorrupted Khajiit, on the other hand, are called true cats. There are a few different ways for true cats to become distorted by Namira's great darkness, but the most well-known method involves the bent dance. It is said that if a cat leaves the true path to follow the rhythm of the heart of Lorkhaj, they may become ensnared by the bent dance. This seems to be a spiritual, metaphorical process akin to losing one's sanity, and those prone to falling into the bent dance should not take part in the consumption of refined moon sugar, aka skooma. A bent cat will not make it to the sands behind the stars, the Khajiit paradise. Instead, they are whisked away to the dark behind the world, Namira's dominion. Becoming a Dromathra affects the cat physiologically as well as spiritually. Their fur will become jet black and exude an ominous aura, and their twisted minds will quickly turn to chaos and destruction. The main Ridfar Redata warned his people against the perils of Namira's enticement. He said, "Namira's darkness swirls amid our dreams and doubts. All the evils of Oblivion rake their claws and gnash their fangs against the lattice, seeking to take our souls as a prize. Be cautious, move swiftly, hide your hearts away in the thick jungles of the self, and think often of their great worth. For if you fail to hear the beating of your own heart, the beat of Lorkhaj's will take its place forevermore." In most cultures, Namira has that sinister skill of beguiling mortals. There's even the story of the beggar prince named Weedle, who was enraptured by Namira's wiles. Funnily enough, the word Weedle literally means to flatter or coax someone into cooperation. And so, despite being considered dark spirits to the cats, few gods are as important to Elswere's culture as Lorkhaj and Namira. There are a few other dark spirits who are, for the most part, very similar to their Daedric counterparts. There's Noctra, the Shadow Thief, the daughter of Twilight, born from the black blood of Lorkhaj at the steps of the Void Gate. When looking at the Daedric Prince Nocturnal, there is often a debate about her relation to Namira, if there is any relation at all. They're both associated with the darkness, but my understanding has always been that Nocturnal is the matron of the shadows, and shadows are a useful tool to a burglar, while Namira's great darkness is the void. The Khajiit religion expands on their relationship a little bit. In the songs, Boethra battled Noctra until it knew it was not Namira. When this was done, Noctra was brought before Azura to be judged. Azura showed mercy and allowed Noctra to live, so long as she served Azura and the Jaka J. But Noctra is rebellious by nature, so she stole one of Azura's keys and fled back to the void. It is written that Azura sent the true spirit of Lorkhaj to find her, and ever since, Noctra has aided the Khajiit when called. Tribes may whisper to Noctra for silence, shade and luck. The other dark spirit is Varmina, the Queen of Nightmares. Unlike most of the catfolk deities, Varmina was not a part of Fadamai's litters. Rather, she sprung into being as a result of Fadamai's maternal fear of losing her children. It is said that Azura killed Varmina to protect the Khajiit, and now she only haunts Khajiit when they dream. There is one final dark spirit, but I will only mention it briefly, as we do not even have a name for it. It is described as a spirit of vengeance, and was born from Azura's grief after the death of Fadamai and Lorkhaj. None can summon this spirit save Azura, Boethra and Mafala, for only they know its true name. It sometimes appears in songs as a black panther, a warrior in ebony armour, or a hidden sword. Theologians have speculated that this spirit is a version of Ebenarm, the god of war. The last school of spirits is the Adversarials. They are not explicitly associated with the Great Darkness, but the clan mothers warn the Khajiiti people about them, for they are dangerous. Much like the Chimera and Dunmer with their House of Troubles, these deities are important to the Pantheon and teach valuable lessons, but they should not be trusted. With this description in mind, I'm sure it will come as no surprise that the first of these adversarial spirits is Shaggerath, the Skooma Cat. In typical Shaggerath fashion, the Khajiiti parallel takes great pleasure in luring vulnerable cats off the true path. He makes them doubt their beliefs, and offers them hollow indulgences, like an ever-present force of chaos, dangling a string in their peripheral vision. The second adversarial spirit is the Khajiiti equivalent to Malakath. His name is Orca, and little is known of him beyond his battles with Boethra. Meruns is the demon cat of destruction, who was both exiled by Arnur and enslaved by Molag. He was eventually freed, and used as a weapon against the Lunar Lattice. Speaking of enslavement, Molag is the spirit of domination and supreme law. He has made many attempts to assault the Lattice, and with the exception of the Plane Meld, he has always been thwarted by Azura and Boethra. Finally, there is Meridinunda, the greedy daughter of Magrus. Magrus never had a litter mate, but created his children, Meridinunda included, from light rather than love. Therefore, this adversarial spirit envies the other gods, and even mortals. She is intellect without wisdom, knowledge without purpose. When she attempted to penetrate the Lunar Lattice, Azura banished her to the void, and trapped her there with mirrors. The remaining deities do not fit into any of these categories, yet remain culturally significant to the cats. Mara and Srendar are two of them, who are both very similar to their Elnathay counterparts. The other three are all gods that are exclusive to Elswere, and are all portrayed as Khajiit themselves. Bandar is the bandit god. He is the embodiment of Khajiit virtues. Fadamai told Azura to create Tamriel's fastest, cleverest, and most deceptive race, and Bandar is the manifestation of these strengths. He is often called the man of 1,000 faces, shapes and sizes. He is also referred to as the master of disguise. The Khajiit are born in a variety of forms, and therefore it makes sense for a deity of many shapes to appear. Next, there's Rajin, who is similar to Bandar in that he embodies the cat-like advantages of speed and stealth. Naturally, the cats are quick and light on their paws, and their footsteps are innately muffled. These are the dream skills of a thief, and thus Rajin was born as a patron to thieves. As most thieves do, Rajin hailed from humble origins. He was a poor cat from the slums of Black Hiergo. He stole 2 Daedric artifacts from Mafala, and the Ogmarin Finium from Hamora. He then stole the tattoo from the Cyrodiilic Empress's neck. Finally, there is Riddlefar. Pious cats will argue all day and night over what or who the Riddlefar is. Is he a true god, or simply a set of principles instilled in the people by the former Mane of Elsewhere, named Ridfar-Redata? Ridfar was born under the eclipse, which signified his role as the spiritual leader of Elsewhere. During a visit to the Temple of Two Moons Dance, Ridfar had what he called the Riddlefar Epiphany. This epiphany occurred at a time when Elsewhere was in a state of profound disarray. But with his new knowledge, Ridfar brought peace. He bestowed to the classes equality under the bilunar shadow, dividing their power in accordance with Two Moons Dance of the Jakane. What this established, in a more understandable sense, was a rotational power base, in which both sides of Khajiit society, the city dwellers under the nobility and the nomadic tribes of the desert chieftains, shared alternate control of the region based on the phases of Massa and Secunda. The terms of this measure were overseen by the thinly veiled dictatorship of the Mane himself. While many of the Khajiiti deities mentioned play a similar role in Elsewhere's religious landscape as the other cultures of Tamriel, there are some significant differences. The Riddlefar is a perfect example of the powerful link between religion in Elsewhere and the culture of its inhabitants. And when combined with the unique biology of the cats and the quirks of their homeland, you can see how their distinctive culture developed. The most obvious thing to remember is that unlike any other Tamrielic race, the moons are inevitably going to be at the very heart of Khajiit spirituality. They're significant in every culture, but no other races can claim that their very bodies were shaped by the positions of Joan and Jode. This also puts into perspective why it was the Daedric Prince Azura who is the chief deity. Even in Morrowind, Azura is not as singularly revered. Azura is the queen of dawn and dusk. She is credited in all cultures for the cycle of night and day, of guiding the sun and the moons in their cycle around the world. It's no surprise, therefore, that she is a mother figure to the Khajiit. Even if the creation story of the cats isn't literal, her sphere impacts the lives of Khajiit every moment of every day and night. When a kitten is born, the parents look to the sky, and if the moons are in sight, they know exactly what breed their new child will be. Crystallized moonlight, aka moon sugar, is the most essential aspect of the Khajiiti diet. In consuming it, they believe they are consuming small portions of their god's eternal souls. And on top of this, every cat strives to follow the true path, so that they may make it to the sands behind the stars, where the dunes are made from moon sugar, and the sands are always warm beneath their paws. So when chaos rears its head in Elsewhere, with chiefs and leaders vying for power, it was easy for the main Ridfar-Redata to have his Riddlefar epiphany. The moons dictate so many facets of Khajiit life, so why not let it govern the land as well? The path of the moons does not take sides. It's not easily corrupted, so why not take the ability to choose who rules out of mortal hands? With Azura and the moons at the core of life in Elsewhere, the guidelines for all cats to follow were safe from greed and corruption. Of course, no society can completely bring an end to conflict, and Elsewhere has seen many bloody wars, and many kingdoms come and go. But it makes sense why this province does not have a united standing army, or an expansionist inclination. For many centuries, the 16 kingdoms of Elsewhere followed the delicate astronomical and political rules of the Riddlefar, without ever turning on each other. Were it not for the Thrashan Plague, which led to the creation of two competing states, Anakinna and Palatine, this equilibrium may never have ended. Elsewhere is often considered to be one of the more contented provinces. They do not try to meddle in the affairs of others like the Empire and the Dominion so frequently do. If the creation story is to be believed, the Khajiit have lived in this region since long before the men and elves came to Tamriel, and after all this time, Elsewhere's borders have remained largely the same. The Khajiit haven't torn each other apart, nor fallen at the hands of their own hubris, like the great empires of the Aelids and the Dwemer, and much of this can be traced back to their beliefs. The cats have no plans to invade neighbouring lands, for they're more interested in looking up, to the sun, the moons and stars, to the path that they each must walk to find their way safely to the sands behind the stars. And there you have it, guys, the creation story of the Khajiit, their religion, and how it has shaped their fascinating society and culture. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Drew, this is Fudge Muppet, and I'll see you in the next one.